of ambiguity are. So the definition that your book provides is the following. These are fallacies caused by a shift or confusion of meanings within an argument. So now, if you look at the definition closely, it gives a clear picture of what fallacies of ambiguity basically are. So now you're dealing with the linguistic problem. Okay, so you have an argument, and in that argument you have certain terms, certain words, certain sentences that may have multiple meanings or ambiguous meanings. And if those kinds of problems arise within an argument, we can say that it is a fallacy of ambiguity. Okay, so it may arise when you have a term used to draw inference has one sense in the premise but another in the conclusion. So a term could have different meanings, and when those different meanings are used in different ways within an argument, we can say that a fallacy of ambiguity has risen. Similarly, like other fallacies, it could be deliberate or it could be accidental. Okay, so it's not necessary that someone is deliberately using these ambiguous terms and throwing them in an argument. No, it doesn't work like that. It could be deliberate or it could be accidental. Okay, so let's just look at the first one, which is equivocation. uh, Fallacy of equivocation is one in which two or more meanings of a word or phrase are used accidentally or deliberately in different parts of an argument. Okay, so this is the clearest of all the cases. You have a word or a phrase, a combination of a few words, and then the way that the meaning of that word or phrase is used is in different ways within the argument. So it could be that it's used in one way in the premise and in another way in the conclusion. And yeah, right. So many words have more than one literal meaning. We all know that. So if it's Urdu, if it's Punjabi, if it's any language that we speak or know of, we can think of words which have same words which have different meanings, right? So if the different meanings of the same word are used within an argument, we can say that a fallacy of ambiguity is uh, has been caused. Okay. So here are some examples. Let's look at the first one. Sure, philosophy helps you argue better. But do we really need to encourage people to argue? There's enough hostility in this world. So what's happening here is that the word argue is basically being used differently in the argument. Okay, so in one sense, it's being used as an argumentation wise, right? Like when you argue, when you write papers, and when you give reasoning, that kind of argumentation, the logical kind of argumentation. And the other sense of the word which is being used in this argument is obviously we can see as in conflict wise. So when people argue and when people have fallen and get into a conflict with one another, so hostility, fighting in that sense. Okay, so it's aggressiveness. That's the other kind of argue that is being used. Okay, so obviously there's a fallacy of equivocation here because the argument is relying on the meaning of argue, which is not used in the premise. So the conclusion gives another meaning of the word. Let's look at the second example. I don't see how you can say you're an ethical person. It's so hard to get you to do anything. Your work ethic is so bad. Okay, so here also we see that the word ethical is being used differently within the argument. So ethical is one sense of the word is that, you're good or you're bad, that kind of ethical. But again, we find that the second way of being its usage is work ethic, which is completely different from that kind of ethical, right? So it has nothing to do with whether you're good or whether you're bad, but it has to do with work ethic. But the argument is structured in such a way that both these meanings are being employed. Okay, so that is what the first one, which is A1, is equivocation. Okay, so if you have any doubts or any questions or any suggestions, write to me about this. Do check it online also. I'm sure there's plenty of material out there also. Okay, the second one is amphibly. So this is a fallacy in which a loose or awkward combination of words are interpreted in more than one way. Okay. So the argument contains a premise based upon one interpretation, while the conclusion relies on a different interpretation. So in the first one, we saw that it was about words or phrases. Now it's become about interpretation. So there are sentences in languages that could be interpreted in multiple ways. So if you use one interpretation and you take out the conclusion from the other interpretation, then we would say that a fallacy of amphibly is being uh, resulting. Okay, so let's look at these headlines. This is going to give you a clear idea what I'm talking about. So these are actual headlines from newspapers. So lawyers give poor free legal advice. Okay, so one interpretation of this sentence, the actual interpretation of this sentence, we is that the lawyers are giving poor people free legal advice, right? That's what it means. But the other interpretation, which is also kind of funny or a witty interpretation, is that lawyers give bad uh, legal advice, right? Poor also means that. So the whole way that this sentence can be interpreted is in multiple ways, in two ways actually. So if Okay, so let's just look at the second example before I go on. So collegians are turning to vegetables, all right? So what that basically means in actuality is that more and more college-going people are eating vegetables. But this could also be interpreted in the sense of when we turn into a vegetable, which means that we're not able-bodied anymore in that sense, right? So you know what vegetables are like. When people become vegetables, they can't move, they're paralyzed in that sense. So that interpretation can also be forwarded from this sentence. Another example: zoo staff mothers abandoned chimp. So you can see this is also the same thing with this one also. It could be interpreted two ways. Okay, so the argument depends upon an ambiguity in grammar, creating a sentence with double meaning. One meaning may make the premises true, but the conclusion is drawn from the other meaning, right? So, what makes it a fallacy is that the meaning that is being provided in the premises is not the meaning that comes about in the conclusion. Okay, let's look at uh, the example of it in an argument form. They said they suspect several people of setting the fire. Okay, therefore, I can't be under suspicion since I was alone that night. So, you see, it's also kind of humorous in a way because um, obviously, what this argument is suggesting is that there was more than one person who set the fire, right? So, on that interpretation, this person is saying, so I can't be the one who set the fire because I was, alone that night. So, the conclusion took out this other meaning, which is kind of a humorous meaning out of it, and turned it into a fallacy. Okay, let me know what you think of it. I hope it's clear. Okay, so the last one is accent, which is very simple. I'll just go over it quickly. So this one occurs when an argument contains a premise that relies on one possible emphasis of certain words, but the conclusion relies on different emphasis that gives those same words a different meaning. Okay, so now it's about what words and how they're emphasized or how they're pronounced. Okay, that makes a big difference. For example, if I say something in if I say something and pronounce the words that I'm saying in that sentence in one sense, and then I pronounce other words, and uh, the entire meaning of sentences change also. Okay. So let's look at this example. We should not speak ill of our friends. So what you need to do when you at your homes is that try emphasizing different words. So if you try speaking this sentence by first emphasizing the word friends, okay. So we should not speak ill of our friends. Okay, then you should try emphasizing the word speak in the sentence. We should not speak ill of our friends. And tell me if that makes any difference in the meaning. Okay, I bet it does. So try doing that. Another way that fallacy of accent also occurs is when we see these how things are put, for example, in advertisements also. So sensational words. How many of you see these online? News stickers, for example. So how they're emphasizing certain words, how they're like in certain things, certain news are enlarged, in red and all this kind of stuff. Even in print news, certain words are capitalized, italicized. And then we have those deals at restaurants, right? So you have, a certain way that people write, okay, so here's the deal. And then in very like small font, it's written exclusive of tax. Okay, so they don't want you to like read this or notice this, so which is why it's very like written in a very small way, or a way that you may not see or neglect, right? So that would also come under fallacy of accent. Okay, so this is the today's lecture. Make sure you try to like grasp all the things that we've talked about, and look at this example again that I said uh, about emphasizing different words. Okay, all right, guys, take care and see you in the next lecture. Bye.